My name is Nassine Saabs.
Let me ask you a question. Has anything ever happened to you that you couldn't explain? That made you feel sort of foolish when you tried to tell somebody about it? Well, if it has, you have plenty of company, as you'll soon see.
Could you remember certain moments in your life which were haunting you?
Yeah, I guess so.
Sure.
What
I
was
do.
Certain moments that are haunting you?
Yeah, well, which following you? You know, which,
No, I
which are
can't
determining
think
your
of great
life.
turning point moments, if that's what you mean.
Yeah. Could you think of certain moments?
Well, when I think of instances in my life that keep coming back in my mind, you know, that jump in all the time. Things like, I remember once, my brother was very, very important to me when I was little, because he was a year older, and somehow my parents were getting a divorce, so therefore you clung to your brothers and sisters. And so
How
we
many
were like,
did you have?
I just had one, and so we were very close, but he used to beat me up all the time. You know how they brothers treat their
beat you up?
Oh, you know, get away from me, you dumb kid, and you know, twists your arm and those kind of things. But I remember one day he played with me all day, and I was like in heaven because he done the things I wanted him to do. You know, he played the certain kind of weird little games I had without thinking I was crazy. And I was so overjoyed that he had done this for me that I remember sitting on the bed in my grandmother's house, and I couldn't express it to him that I loved him so much. So I leaned over and bit his ear as hard as I could until it bled. And he hit me. He hit me. Get away. I don't ever want to play with you again. And I was so hurt, but all I was trying to say was how much I loved him, and it came out in some violent kind of thing.
Marvelous
Gee, that's a
moment.
good story. I know them, but that they knew me. I can't get over that. It's magic. It's the devil's work.
It is.
It's the magic box that steals our faces.
It's very weird, and if you're not fitting what those people think you are, then they think there's something wrong with you. If I'm not smiling all the time, you know, if I'm a normal person that sits around and, you know, and thinking or whatever, are you sad? What is it? Did your mother die? Something terrible? You know, you weren't smiling.
Because you're supposed to be the jolly person on the screen.
I guess so.
Yeah.
You know, the Arabs used to kill people when they photographed them. In the early time, when a photographer came to the Arabs and photographed them, they used to kill them because they thought they steal the soul of the people by taking a photograph.
Not only in the Arabs, but there are a lot of also primitive tribes have thought of it.
Well, in a
I
way,
wonder why
it's
they
true.
get that
In a
idea
way,
that-
it's true. When you're an actor, in a way, you steal away the soul when you take a picture. I think that's probably what Sally feels.
What Sally feels.
What Sally feels. What do you feel, Sally, about that?
I don't feel that it steals away your soul. I mean, I think that, well, for me, stage was always, I mean, even before I was on the stage, when I was a little girl, I used to play by myself because I was afraid people would think I was weird, you know, and call me crazy, and so I kept away from them.
Why are you afraid of being called crazy?
Because
I think
at
it's
that time,
marvelous
I
somebody's
thought it was
crazy.
a thing that
But
wasn't
why?
acceptable.
Because of the habits of other people?
Well, because you just think that being crazy is something that's distasteful, and people are going to cringe and run
But
away
why?
and shriek.
I think crazy is being marvelous.
Well, I think
Somebody's
it's marvelous
crazy is
now,
unusual.
but I didn't think it was then
Did
nice.
your parents say crazy is something you shouldn't be?
No, they didn't say anything one way or the other. I mean, I felt I think, which is just a giant cop-out, which keeps you from people, so that you don't have to show yourself. You know, when you're vulnerable, you just, good things so that you don't have to show anything. But I used to sit in front of the mirror all the time, and instead of playing house, I used to play acting. You know, I'm now acting. So I used to say, well, I'm going to pretend that my mother's died, and I'm going to cry and cry and cry. So I'd sit in front of the mirror and cry and go through all these.
So in parts 1 through 10, I covered many aspects of the etymologies that are related to the aspect of the sun god, Ra, or Re, or Apollo, Shamash, and by Utu and many other names throughout history. So let's take a look at some words that are etymologically related to the sun god Re, or Ra. Like I said earlier, the sun is the sower and the reaper of the harvest. So this is why Rai is named after the sun god. So the harvest is the end of the age, the end, which is death, the harvest. So that's why we have the catcher and the rye, which of course is all about the red, bloody death. So much of mythology and mysteries of today actually come from the ancient harvest, the ancient grain rituals that were around for thousands of years before the Bible. And of course, all of this ancient mysticism is based upon the annual cycles of the harvest, the sowing and the reaping, thus the life and death. So these ancient rituals all revolved and had all of this death mysticism towards the end of the age at the end of the harvest, which is death of life. Thus it was known as the last sheaf, which held all of the prophecy and the mystic spiritual elements that were held in the harvest. And this last sheaf was known as the ancient, goddess, but also basically the spirit of life itself in the harvest, and it had to be carried over into the next year. Thus, in order to be reborn, it had to be slain. And this is where we get the concept of the slain god or the slain king, the killing of the king. And of course, they always have to chop them into pieces. Thus, Saturn was chopped into pieces, Dionysus, Baal, and of course, Osiris. And and that's why when JFK, the king, was slain during noontime, the time of the sun, high noon, thus we saw his wife picking up his pieces and gathering his parts, exactly like Osiris and Isis. So just like Osiris, it was the resurrection from death, aka what we know today as the Green Man. Thus, the life of God's Son, the sower and the reaper, the seed of divide. So you see, the truth is, the devil, Satan, is just Saturn. Both are known to be ruling at the end of the age, because that's what they symbolize. They symbolize death at the end of the age, which is why we have the last sheaf, for example. It's just talking about the age of Saturn, when he rules over and takes over the time of the sun during that season. So that's why we have the last book in the Bible, the book of Revelation. And if you did your research, you'd know that the Bible takes its name from the Phoenician city of Byblos, which takes its name by the way of Cronus or Saturn. And so some people tell me, Truth Heresy, your etymology only works on some words. It can't work on all words, like Ra, for example, or Ray. How does the word rat, relate to Ray or Ra? You see, rats and mice are rodents. The Ro of the Ra of Re, the sun god. But how, might you ask, are they related? Simple. They are related in every fundamental way, because the rats were always in the fields, in the crops. The rats, the rodents, and the mice were the ones that were attracted to the grains and the rice, which is named after the rays of the sun. So in fact, the etymology does lead us to the root source and the true meaning. You see, that's why the grains are the Gaia and Ra, the earth and the sun. So through etymology alone, the very word grain is very revealing, thus showing Gaia, Ra, and the Ain, the earth, the sun, and the rain. So of course this gives us our GR words like grain, grow, grass, and group, that all grow green on the ground of Gaia. And so now you'll understand the name of a grape. And of course, the grapes make the wine, which is created by the seasons of the rain and the sun. Which of course is why Jesus' first miracle is to change water into wine, because that's what the Son of God does. And of course, rodents and rats are symbols of fertility, because they are prolific and they reproduce rapidly. So the dent in rodent is referring to the DE word, or a dalet word from Hebrew, implying that it's a doorway going down to the underworld, like a hole, like a dent, or like when we go to the dentist, like a mother's den, the cavity, the hole, the sacred hole of the goddess, thus Mother Earth. And of course, rats crawl and live inside of dens and holes, exactly like the serpents, which of course is the fertility symbol of the male, which devours the rodents. And of course, Apollo, the sun god, was known to transform into a rodent, thus Apollo playing the role of the harvest lord. He is the one who is in control of the crops in the fields. Thus, he has to control the rats, the mice, and the rodents. So on the sundial Chinese zodiac, which dates back thousands of years, we find the symbology of the rat, which actually basically correlates to the time of winter, which correlates to the zodiac house of Capricorn, Saturn L. So most people aren't even aware of the symbolism and the mystique and the ancient mythological aspect that the rodent plays in our society. This is why it's embedded in all of our media and our stories, and our culture. So this ancient mythological aspect of the rodent is why they indoctrinate our children and use the rodents in cartoons and animations. So since we've been kids, we've been spoon-fed these concepts, but we were most likely blind to realizing that these symbolic creatures were the very foundation of many of our cartoons as we grew up. So rats are crafty little creatures, and they're very cunning, and they're survivalists, and this is why they play an important role, like I said, in our culture. So most people don't realize that, the mouse and the rats are, they're portrayed to be cute, but they're actually symbolically, evil and nasty and gross. And of course, this is why it is associated with witchcraft and sorcery.
Then he transformed into a rat.
Show me. Give in to him, Ron.
What are you trying to do to him? Scabbers! Leave him alone! Get off him! What are you doing? Tell him!
And of course, this is exactly why the Bible has the golden mouse. The gold represents the sun and the silver represents the moon. In Christianity, the mouse is demonized for allegedly gnarling at the foot of the cross. Thus, rodents and rats are creatures of foresight and prudence. So that's why a race to your death is known as a rat race. In fact, the very word race has the word Ra in it. In fact, in the ancient world, many races were held in the honor of the sun god, the golden sun god Apollo. So now you understand why the Wizard of Oz is the sun going through the 4 seasons on the yellow brick road. So this is why races are held in lanes or roads, because the road is from Ra, the sun. And when we're on a road, that's why we follow the yellow brick road, where you'll find reflectors. And so now you'll understand why our cars have Horus power of the sun Apollo god and his horse. So we're going to come back to Apollo the sun god, but first I want to cover a few other etymologies.